Increasingly then, this space becomes ordered. Lifelong learning is a major discourse that starts to affect our field. Because in a sense, everything in it could be treated as lifelong learning. Secondly, the knowledge economy comes into the field, though it's not quite clear really how, but it does. This dynamic knowledge-based economy aim. Then we get into Lisbon and the open method of comparison, where the notion of comparative work starts to build. And the Commission, instead of just relying on the OECD, starts to fund, well, it funds the OECD actually. The PISA work starts with European funding. But it's more than that, it starts to create its own research agency in northern Italy, ISPRA, for its own data. So if I recall, a person who was a senior person in the policy department of the Commission, who I saw in about 1990, and I asked about what their work was, what they were doing, at the end of the conversation could only point towards one book and say, this is a great book. We published this book. This is our book. When I saw him about 10 years later, he'd moved, do you know Brussels? Do you know the European Commission? No, the education building in Brussels, I forgot what it's called. A beautiful, beautiful blue, tall building. He's towards the top floor and he's looking out. He's looking out not only on Brussels, and his speech is looking out on Europe. And he says to me, because of this new data we've got and what we can do, basically it was a panoptic vision. It was a panopticon. We can tell which country is better at this, which country does not do this as it should. It was incredible. It's the same man. He'd just been, as it were, made powerful by the data and the money they put into, and he had a lot of money, put into, controlling is maybe too strong a word, but controlling through understanding European education. Okay, so then I did the proper work. I was looking at European Union agencies related to education, even in social science. I was looking at Eurydice. I went to CERI, and was trying to get them to talk to me, though they weren't very good, and OECD a little bit. My assumption was the EU was building, in its work in education, relevant knowledge in all forms. It was building it through its experts, through its agencies, through its collaborations, through its research monies, through the focusing of its work more and more. And if I can compare working in European projects over a space of about 15 years, we moved from being welcomed, evaluated, but welcomed, and somebody saying once to us, well, we appreciate your work. We moved into, at the end of that period, a kind of triple layer of evaluation embodied in people sitting in the meetings, actually sometimes in a kind of middle level, sitting in the meetings and threatening us. You know, have you done your work? These are other professors from elsewhere in Europe. And then finally being checked and double checked. So we were not just, it was not a soft governance, it was a steered and managed governance more and more, quite tightly. And when you also think that European projects, in my view, research projects, were not about the research sometimes, they were about making sure that some countries were in the project. Okay? If there was new accession countries, they had to be in it. In a way, even though it seemed as a research project, they were actually governing projects. Okay, so I want to go back to my problem, which that old paper, well, early paper, on board that education refers to. When I was trying to think in my early days about Europe, I first of all concentrated on the notion of networking, which I was more familiar with, which was growing as an idea, which could be treated as a professional, expert, collegial notion. And I was thinking about, like the EU net or whatever, a steady, almost organic growth at one level of a European space, where people were knitting and connecting this world together. And in one of the first meetings, when the European Union net was being organized between the ministries, the guy who was organizing it all, a Swedish administrator, kept leaving our meeting and going to another room. And we didn't understand why. And he kept saying, well, eventually, well, in that other room are the new software people in Spain or Austria or whatever that we want to get them commercially to build the platforms we need. So it was a kind of two-pronged thing. There was the idea and the expert, the professional. There was the commercial, the business arm as well. He had both arms. I never saw them. I don't know what that arm looked like. But I do know that I had not, since that time, I had not really seen what you might call their partners in commerce and industry. I had not really been aware of them. Somebody said something, well, we can't have Oracle in this project because it's an American company. And what's this? I mean, all kinds of little things, but not much. So, and I was never in joint meetings with, as they said, with Microsoft or anything. I didn't know anything about that. So I saw this world, the world of soft governance, as being created by us, basically, by our connections and interconnections. That's what I viewed. So when there was talk about distance learning, mobilities, and common qualifications, I tended, actually, although I say something different, I tended to think of them as university-based ideas. I could see that the market, profit, and technology was involved in there somewhere, but since British universities are private companies anyway, more or less, I didn't see it as a distinct issue. Who were these people? Okay, so. Okay, first, is that argument gone too fast? Have I been pushing that along too fast because I want to get on? We have plenty of time. Was my view of the world more easily expressed in last year's MOOC, but still expressed here? What evidence I was pulling in, why I tended to associate certain things, an experience. When I moved into new things like standardization or I forget the other ones, I was more or less taking them safely on my ground and saying, no, this could apply, this is how it applies. Do you see that notion of trying to build something that seems very indistinct and using just one particular set of data, really? My experience, what I could view, what was being given back to me, through research projects, because I'm tending to think it was confirming things rather than challenging things. Every new conversation, every new project was building the same view in a way, which more or less started as soft governance, but then started to get a bit tighter, certainly a tighter form of governance. We weren't just friendly volunteers. We weren't just then being shaped by common experience. We were distance workers, flexible workers.